It's 8:52. We have time to go. Zap, kick us off.
What do I say again?
Actually, I think that's the best way to start this intro. So.
I feel like you say something and I don't remember what it is.
No, okay. Well,
This is great B-roll, by the way. This is terrific.
Hello, everybody. This is how we do it. We started out here with a music industry vet right now, or soon to be. We'll kind of dive in all here. We got Aaron Davis, everyone. Aaron, how you doing today, man?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
I know, we're super excited to have you on. It took us a couple months to round you up.
We've been busy.
Traveling and building dome houses and everything like that.
Indeed.
So where were you? You were just, where was he, in Croatia or somewhere? Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any ties to Europe? Because I know rugby, right?
Well, rugby was sort of a lifetime ago, but my company, I own a company with a business partner, Renee Meredith, Exploration.io. We're copyright administrators, which the short story is that we organize the data that helps to uniquely identify music around the world, such that attribution and payment is accurately and appropriately given to the rightful owner. So we are sort of genre agnostic. We work with lots of different artists and writers and labels and publishers and PROs and different entities that control and manage music around the world. And so I'd say one of my main jobs as the leader of that company is to go meet with clients. And so, prior to COVID, I was traveling 50% worldwide. And so it's just sort of starting to kick back up. And we've got a lovely client in Berlin, and they wanted to meet me in person. And so I said, I'll be right there. And I got on a plane.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
So you're in the music industry. Has that always been something?
No.
Yeah, I want to back up to Aaron has had many entrepreneurial endeavors.
Yeah.
And I think I know what the first one is.
I don't think you do.
Was it the football club?
No.
What was the first one then?
The first business was an ATM. I owned a
right.
kiosk, sort of the ATM that you see in the convenience store or what have you. I bought an ATM machine when I was a freshman in college, and I was working at a club, a little nightclub, and I was working the door. And we only took cash. This is in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we only took cash. And every fifth person would say, I don't have any cash to pay the cover to get in the bar. And I would send them to a bank ATM, which were, it was about a 3 or 4 block radius from us to get to those things. And this happened enough times, I was like, if I owned an ATM, I would do really well. And so I researched and figured it out. And there was a little mini market across the street, and I sold them on the idea to let me put an ATM in there for a commission. So I gave them 25 cents of the dollar commission in order to put the ATM in there. And so they were stoked about that. It had the same footprint as like a NABS rack of crackers, but made a lot more money. And it did very, very well. And so that was sort of my first real business.
How much money did you make from the ATM
business?
Yeah.
So, sort of quick math. If it does 10 transactions a day, that's 30 a month, and we were charging $1, and then we also got 50 cents from the bank, so that's $450. We had a phone line to process, to dial up to process the transaction. A little bit of insurance, which is like $20.
Yeah.
So like $30 for a phone line, $20 for the insurance, and then a little bit of paper and ink. And then there was a commission to the store owner and a little bit of a commission for the processing. And so it netted somewhere on the order of about $300 a month. And I had 7 of them.
Oh, dang.
By the end. And then when I moved from North Carolina to California, I sold the portfolio and moved.
And that was your first dip of your toes in entrepreneurship.
Kind of. I mean, I'd say my very first one was my granddad made wooden toys. It's sort of clunky, toys that, like little cars and different little things that you could play with for little kids, very small kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of his hobby as he was getting older. And so I would go with him to the flea market and I'd learn about entrepreneurship, and he'd rent me a space beside him. And he's like, okay, there's cost of goods sold, there's rent, your time is worth something. And he began to teach me this stuff. And I would set up and take the toys. I'd take sort of a small portion of the toys that he was selling, and I'd put it in my little space, and I'd try to negotiate and stuff. But what was great about that experience is that I grew up sort of in the country, and I was really into the outdoors and camping and this sort of thing. And so I was fascinated with like Army Navy surplus. And I was like, I'd get there early to the flea market and I'd set up my little thing. And then I'd go scope out all of the various booths around the flea market that had Army Navy surplus, because I wanted an Alice pack, or I wanted some new camo, or I wanted new boots, or all this different stuff. Yeah. But in the process of it, and granted, I'm 8 or 9 at this point, right? Yeah. And so what I learned was like this guy over here, like the most prized thing that you could sell in Army Navy surplus was called a ghillie suit, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was a ghillie suit, which is a one-piece suit that looks like a bush, right? It's got all this stuff all over it, and it looks like a bush. And I went over to this one guy over here, and he didn't have very much inventory at all. And then I went all the way on the other side of the flea market, and this guy's got like more than enough. And so I was like, hey, can I buy a few of these ghillie suits for $50? Yeah. And he's like, sure. And so then I went over here and I was like, hey, I know where there's some ghillie suits. Will you loan me the money to go buy these things? And he's like, well, yeah. Like, when are you coming back? I'm like, I'll be back in 20 minutes. But they're $80. And he's like, sweet, because I can sell them for $100. And so he gave me, $240 to go buy 3 ghillie suits. I went and bought them for $150, put 90 in my pocket, and gave it to him. And I was like, oh my God, this is magic. Like, this is, and my granddad's like, you got it.
You're out here wholesaling ghillie suits.
Yeah. It's just arbitrage, right? And arbitrage is a really, is a fantastic thing.
Gosh, that's insane. And so that was 8 years old. You went out and you're just, wholesaling ghillie suits. Yeah, hustling out on it. And
then ATM machines. When does the football team come into play?
Yeah, so I played rugby in college, and it was playing pretty well. I was also in student government. I was the president of the university, my senior class president my senior year, and was very involved with student politics and sort of operational support at the university as a student. And I had been an student athlete, and I'd made a little bit of money with the ATMs. And I graduated and sort of was taking a break from rugby. And there was this new minor league football team that had come to town. And there was this beautiful stadium. Legion Stadium was like this 100-year-old stadium that had just totally been redone on the bill of a minor league soccer team that was in town. And so it was fantastic. There was all these guys that wanted to play. And my buddy, I was building this little river cabin on the Cape Fear River, and my buddy, who was a high school friend, was helping me. And he's like, hey man, let's go back to the old school. I'll be quarterback, you'll be my tight end. We'll like have a lot of fun. We'll score some touchdowns. Let's do it. And I'm like, yeah, that actually sounds pretty fun. Let's go. And so we go and we're playing football, and it was called the Port City Thunder. Okay. And we're out there playing, and it's so much fun. And I go to the management of the team, who, in fairness, their heart was in the right place, but they were just poor business people. Mm-hmm. They were passionate about football, and they were engaged with the community, or trying to be engaged with the immediate community, the players and player adjacent people. But they were poor business people. And so I was like, there's like 250 people showing up to these games. This stadium is world class. It holds 6,000 people. Why don't we engage with the university? There's no football at UNCW. Oh, wow. We're in southeastern North Carolina. Like, it's like Texas. Like, it's like football is religion, Uh-huh. Friday night lights is a whole thing, right? There's no university football for 2 hours. East Carolina was the nearest team that had a football team. And so I'm like, we can do this stuff. And they're like, thanks, you're a player. You should play. And I'm like, okay. And so they folded before the end of the season.
Uh-huh.
And a few of the players had known that I'd, had a little bit of money and, and I'm like, thinking, I was really enjoying it and was like engaged. And so they were like, Aaron, why don't you start a team? And so I offered to actually buy what was remaining of the team that had just folded. And they were not interested. And so I was like, okay, I'll just start it from scratch. And so it was called the Port City Diesel. And we had televised games and we sold out and we had the 82nd Airborne drop the ball in and we got sponsorship from the Panthers, Carolina Panthers. And it was a whole thing. It was amazing. It was.
Wait, and how old were you with it when?
I was 23. I was 22 or 23. I just graduated from school, from UNCW.
Dang, and then you went out and started a...
Yeah, it was a mistake. I had a lot of looking back on it, I feel like there's businesses that you start to make money and there's businesses that you start when you have money.
Yeah.
A sports team is one of the latter.
So when you have the money.
Yeah, my job was writing checks. Like it didn't make, I didn't break even, but it was totally fun and it was, it was super exciting and, I would walk out to the front of the parking lot during a game.
Yeah.
And it was like this, there was one game in particular where we shared, the football stadium was here and there was a minor league baseball team that was in part of the same complex. And we both had sold out games. And it was like, there was like heat waves rising up out of the stadiums. There's kids running around with their faces painted. It was like, it was pretty surreal that, hey, I created this thing. It was this idea, and here it is, that we can wrap our arms around this thing. But I was, in the end, I kind of, I was 26. I'd ran it for 3 years, and I was 26, and I kind of went to bed one night. I was dating a gal. I had this house that I'd built. I was living in. I'm running this businesses, the ATMs, and the football team. And I kind of woke up the next day and was like, if I don't leave tomorrow, I'm going to wake up and be like 62 and I'm still going to be in this small town. And and so there was a fellow that had invested in it in the second year, and he was keen to run it. He and his group were keen to run it on their own and made me an offer. And I was like, okay, let's, and so it was very, very quick. They bought my shares of the company, the ATM machine. I sold to the locations. I sold the actual machines to the locations, and went to California. Go west, young man, they said.
What? And you were 26. God, this makes me feel like, you're just running around. Like, you were playing on the team, and you also owned it?
The third season, I decided to go back and play. The first two, I was just the owner.
So you were owner and player.
Well,
wow.
The third year, because I was like, this is so painful to do this. It's such a thankless job, right? Like, everybody's got a problem. There's all the, in any business, there's all these thwe that go on behind the scenes that no one in the storefront sees, right? There's all this stuff. And I was very inexperienced, and we were way undercapitalized. And so we were trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat,
Yeah.
We were making something from nothing, and it was just too much in the end. And it was like, if I'm gonna just like incur all of this brain damage, I'm at least gonna go out and have some fun. Like, I want to go out and play. And I told the coaches, I was like, you need to be objective. Like, don't let me play just because I own the team. Like, it should be a meritocracy.
Yeah.
And but it was incredibly fun, and I learned a ton. And it was looking back on it, I probably wouldn't have done it. I probably
Really?
wouldn't have. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have enough. It was so undercapitalized. I didn't have enough money,
Sure.
you know, and it didn't make any money. And I was at a point in my career, I was so young that if I just like focused on the ATM machines, that could have been a really big, that could have made a lot of money and grown some wealth.
But you do fun stuff in your 20s, right?
Well, of course, that's what I was just gonna say. It's like it's important to take big swings and try things that, you know, if you're married and you have kids and mortgages and all this sort of thing,
Totally.
the risk associated with doing something like that is so great that you're probably not even able to. And so as a young guy, it was just like, you know, to work an 18-hour day was nothing, right? Yeah. And just, you know, I work the ticket booth, and then I'm going to help them clean up afterward, and everything. Wow. And I'm going to go sell sponsorships, and I'm going to do things in the paper. I'm going to wear the bulldog suit in the parade. It was like whatever, anything and everything. I want to try it and I want to do it, and it was exciting. It was fun.
Oh my
And
God.
then, can you walk us? I know you have a huge portion of life where you're in California, you go to Europe, but maybe walk us through everything that quickly happened up until how you figured out how to start exploration.
Sure. I mean, it was basically rugby. The short story is that I'd played in a World Games overseas in college as a rugby player, and when I decided that I was ready to leave Wilmington, my natural inclination was to stay in sports. I understood business, I was an athlete, and that I could speak that language. And so I'm looking at sports teams around the country in towns where I had some sort of connection or some sort of tie-in, and it was also a place that I wanted to go. And so, you know, I kind of landed on the New Orleans Saints. And Arnie Fico, who was the president and CEO of the team, had played Masters basketball in the same World Games I'd played rugby in as a young guy. And so I called him, and he took my call and was like, "Yeah, I'll give you an interview. Come down here." And I was like, "Okay, this is going to work out great." So I go to New Orleans. He is like, "Look, we'll give you a job, but we're in the middle of the season. You know, it seems like you want a job now. There's another guy that played on our team. He's at the Garden in New York. Why don't you go to New York?" And so I was like, done. So I go to New York. He tells me the same thing, right? And he's like, we'll hire you, but we're kind of in the middle of this thing, you know. And I'm like, okay, that sucks. I'm in my suit. I'm at the Garden, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna walk down to I was just sort of out of sorts. Like, what am I gonna do? I knew I didn't want to be in Wilmington, and so I just legged it to Wall Street, which is a long walk. It's like 30 blocks. And so I legged it to Wall Street, and I start walking into brokerages and saying, like, "Look, I'm really good at math. I can do it in my head. I can sell anything on the phone. You should hire me."
No way.
And like the fifth door I walked in, they were like, "Done. Well, you know, you're gonna have to sit for your Series 7, but we'll hire you. It's gonna be $300 a week, and we'll hire you." And I'm like, "Cool." So I left there. I got a ticket. I was sitting at JFK, ready to go home and like tell my world that I'm moving to New York City to work on Wall Street. And my phone rings, and it's the rugby coach of Santa Monica, who was like, "I heard you played really well in these World Games in 2001. You know, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing." He's like, "Are you fit?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've been training." Like I'd been on like a 3-week bender, right? To New Orleans and to New York. And so he's like, "Do you want to come this weekend to Austin and play rugby, you know, play with Santa Monica? We made it to the Final Four last year. Your position is in high demand. Do you want to come play?" And I'm like, "You're paying for it? Sure, let's go." And I was like, "I don't have any kit. Like I don't have anything, right?" And so he's like, "You know, we'll take care of it. We'll figure it out." And I go to Austin. I play out of my head. I get on with the boys, and he's like, "You should really come to Santa Monica." And I'm like, "Okay, New York, Santa Monica, let's go."
Yeah.
So you picked rugby.
So I picked rugby over Wall Street.
Screw Wall Street.
Yeah. We went 20-1. We won the national championship that season.
Wow.
I then went overseas. I got a silver medal with the United States in the Maccabi games. The next season, we played like jerks for the entire season, but because of some like weird matrix thing with point differentials, we were the bottom seed going into the playoffs and got our act together and won the national championship again.
Yeah.
Then a bunch of the guys got contracts. They went all over everywhere. I went to Argentina, came back, and then sort of took a little bit of a hiatus. I had some surgery in 2009. Came back for sort of my final stanza in 2013, went overseas again. Yeah, and then finally hung up the boots in the end of 2013, broke my leg against Canada.
Yeah.
And so on the heels of that, I come home. This woman that was a photographer for the rugby team, who was just a friend, came around with a couple jars of beer and was like, welcome home. What are you doing? Tired of loathing about myself. What are you doing? And she's like, if I see one more Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball video, I'm going to do my head in. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means. And she began to tell me a little bit about the nuance of managing copyright on this new thing that had just allowed monetization called YouTube. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And so she's like, yeah, well, Miley had just done her thing at the VMAs for Wrecking Ball, and lots of covers are getting uploaded, and we're claiming them, as it were, to assert copyright. And I'm like, okay, well, but the same folks that own Miley own the Johnny Cash catalog. Like, what's going on with that? She's like, well, it's kind of not it's not the hit thing, but it is, and so what I immediately posited was that if you could somehow find all of those things on the long tail, that collectively that would dwarf the hits. But you needed to have software to find everything, because somewhere on the order of like 200 hours of media were being uploaded per minute to YouTube at the time. And so if you didn't have software, you couldn't find it all. And so I literally had a broken leg. I'm laying there. And so me and a buddy hacked up some software to sort of an algorithm to find this stuff. YouTube, when you search for Jailhouse Rock on YouTube, it's going to surface Jailhouse Rock videos, maybe the lyric video and the official music video and maybe a popular cover, but then maybe it's going to surface some Johnny Cash and some Tanya Tucker and some other stuff that we think you might like in addition to Jailhouse Rock, right? Because they're trying to give you different things that you're going to enjoy. I don't care about all that other stuff. The only thing I care about is Jailhouse Rock and derivatives of Jailhouse Rock. And so, you know what an API is? Mm-hmm. Okay. API is?
Enough to understand what you're about to talk about.
Okay, so there's these big companies that have giant databases, right? There's a surface layer that we interact with Facebook or with YouTube, right? Then you go to youtube.com or the app to then engage with this giant database of content. And so, like I was saying, their algorithm is going to surface all this other stuff that we think you might like, or what have you, or variations of it. I don't care about any of that other stuff. I just want to see Jailhouse Rock. And so I use the API, the data API, to ping it for Jailhouse Rock, or misspellings of Jailhouse Rock, or different languages of Jailhouse Rock. And I want to know everything that is Jailhouse Rock, basically. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to review that. And I'm going to understand, is this me and Haley outside singing a cover of that?
Yeah.
Or is it our trip to Graceland where we're just talking about it and we call it Jailhouse Rock? Because one has a copyright embedded in it, the other one doesn't. So, to explain just really briefly about the nuance of the publishing versus the label business, which is fundamental to the music business, and a lot of people really don't understand.
Which I think is super important.
Yeah. So Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller were the composers of Jailhouse Rock. They wrote the lyrics and the melody and the notes of that song, the sheet music, right? That's a composition. That's owned by a music publisher, right? They gave that composition to Elvis. He went in the studio and recorded it. That's a sound recording or a master recording. That's owned by a record label. Two distinct and separate copyrights. Then Motley Crue and the Beatles and Queen and a gazillion other people each covered that song. Those are new master recordings in their own right. Same underlying composition or embedded composition, as it were. We can go outside right now and record a cover of that on our iPhone, upload it to YouTube, and monetize it worldwide. And YouTube's Content ID system that works kind of like Shazam doesn't pick it up because we don't sound like Elvis. Mm-hmm. So it goes unattributed to Jerry and Mike. And so when I realized that, and it's not easy nut to crack because a composition is sort of an idea.
Yeah.
It's a song, right? It's the notes and the lyrics. It might have a different tempo and it might have a different pitch and tone and different things added into it that don't make it easy to find programmatically, but there's a couple ways that you can find it, one of which is the text. If it says Jailhouse Rock, cover, remix, compilation, then it's like that's a signal that, hey, this might actually have our copyright in it. Let's review it. And then if it does, assert copyright, and the money then flows to the appropriate party. So in the olden days, a record label would sell a record at a record store. The record store would give $10 to the record label. The record label would then pay the artist, and then the publisher, and then the publisher would pay the writer, right? You can imagine how that gets convoluted really quickly, and it's very opaque. And so when the digital streaming entities came online, they said, as it were, that we're going to split at source. So we're going to pay the labels what they're due as per their rate, and the publishers what they're due as per their rate. And you know, all of the publishers sort of gave a collective yay, oh no, because it had been this really sleepy sort of reactive business the publishing business is older than the record business. You know, they had, you know, there was people writing and selling sheet music prior to recorded music, right? And so it's this very old business. And for the first time in history, they were sort of in control of their own destiny, but ill-equipped to do so because they didn't have any of this data. A lot of it didn't make sense, and it was like, how do we do this? And when I learned all this, I was like, wow, this is an opportunity.
And you really learned this over like sharing some beers, correct?
Well,
That's what I was going to ask.
yeah. I mean, that was part of it.
Like this is like started as like literally like a napkin idea. It sounds like, which obviously then you delved more into, but.
Well, Renee had studied music business at Belmont here in Nashville.
I didn't know that.
She studied music business at Belmont. She started in the mailroom at a little company called Windswept, which was bought by Bug. Bug was bought by BMG, which is a huge international company. And then they moved her out west to be head of West Coast licensing in LA.
Is Renee the girl that showed you the Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball? Okay, okay.
Yeah, and that's my partner, right?
Oh, okay.
She's my 50-50 partner. We're
Cool.
50-50, equally, wholly, privately.
Gotcha.
We bootstrapped the company. All the credit to her. There was a couple times in the start of the business where where we got offered money, and I was like, please, I want some food with my meals, and she's like, no, we're not, I don't want to owe anybody anything. We can, here's a piece of bread, here's mayonnaise sandwiches.
Yeah, why did you guys decide to bootstrap?
I was ready to take capital at the beginning. I was, we got offered plenty of money from great investors, and Renee was like, I just don't want to do it.
I think it's a good point too. Not every company needs to go out.
You're right.
And raise money, right? And I feel like the first thing that people do is like sprint to investors.
I think it's the wrong move. I think it's really, really easy to test a market today, even if you sandbag a few leads, right? Like when I bought my house, I put my house in, it was a modest house out in the country. I put my house under contract. It was in escrow, and I found some pictures online of a cute little Airstream with some fairy lights and a little deck around it, and I made a fake Airbnb ad. And I put it on Airbnb and on Craigslist.
By the way, Aaron does this constantly.
So
He'll make ads for businesses that don't exist.
And test it. And so my idea was like, I'm going to make this fake ad for what I envision putting here on this property. And will people, real humans, actually want to come out here to the middle of nowhere and stay in an Airstream? And within hours, people were clicking through, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is done. And so the very first thing I did as soon as I closed, before I fixed the hole in the roof that you could see from the living room, I bought an Airstream and made it a little Airbnb on the property, which pays the mortgage.
Oh.
But I was able to do that there was zero cost in that to test that. And so I believe that if you have an idea, find the Y Combinator. Maybe we can put a link to it in the show notes. Find the Y Combinator interview questions, right? And answer those questions for yourself. And then build a landing page and spend a couple $100 driving some traffic to it. And, it's all theory until a stranger on the internet gives you their credit card.
Yeah.
It's a nothing burger until somebody is willing to give you it. But people are willing to do it. I had an idea, and I was asking my buddy, I was like, he's like, do you think 1,000 people are interested in this thing? Can we? He's like, man, have you been to Reddit? Man, there's 1,000 people that are interested in everything. Yeah. You know what I mean? But you have to have a compelling narrative to attract them, capture it, and yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'd love to chat about what you're really building right now with Tuesday Music. Can you?
Yeah. So Exploration doesn't own any copyrights. Exploration is purely a copyright administrator. We work on behalf of our clients to organize the data that identifies their music and then collect the revenue that is due them and pay an account each and every month. And we had several very large clients in that were gigantic in my purview that sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. And we were on both the buy and the sell side multiple times. And I'm looking at this like, wow, we're collecting good fees, but nothing compared to what these folks are doing.
Yeah.
And so, this is kind of.
And these people, like they're already your clients.
That's right. They're already my clients. I've got the data. I'm helping them. I understand the revenues. I understand where the issues are with these catalogs, or what the potential pitfalls might be. And so this is kind of percolating in my mind. And then a really, really small client, was making like, $60,000 a year, said, Aaron, Megacorp from Europe called. They want to buy my catalog. I'm ready to call it a day. But I told them I'm giving you first right of refusal.
Wow.
Well, wow, that's a blessing. That's cool. Okay. And so, I spoke to Renee about it. She's like, Aaron, this sounds really good, but I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm like, okay, don't take my word for it. Talk to the attorney, talk to the business manager, talk to, your banker, and she did, and she came back and she said, they said the same thing you did. I just don't want anything to do with it. We're having a lot of success here. I'm satisfied with this. I want to just continue to focus on this, but I'll give you my blessing. You can do it if you want to. And I was like, would you mind writing that in an email and memorializing that? And so she did, and very generously. And so I began to think about how might I position myself to buy copyrights and buy music, and basically, where are there holes in the market? And so, I went to every bank on Music Row. I called the usual suspects that are buying copyrights. And what I learned was that that there were transactional inefficiencies that were so great that anything less than if a catalog was making less than $200,000 to $300,000 a year, which at a 10x at the bottom of the valuations is $2 to $3 million. If it was making less than that, there just wasn't interest because there was no. It just didn't feel like there was enough meat on the bone, and the transactional cost was such that it just didn't pencil.
And how many songs are in a catalog?
It can be one.
Oh, okay.
It can be one song. It can be a portion of a song, up to thousands and thousands, right?
So you own like essentially shares of a song?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So if you and I write a song, the example we were giving before, Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller were the composers of Jailhouse Rock. They own that song 50-50, right? And so if it makes $10, he gets $5 and he gets $5.
Gotcha.
Right?
Cool.
And so, and you can sell your portion of that to someone else, right? And it happens all the time. But the way the banks are set up and the way most private equity, most big acquirers of music catalogs are created is that if it's less than a couple $1,000,000, the transactional cost is such that it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't pencil. And so, and the same thing at the bank. There's no leverage. You can't get leverage. You can't get a loan against it to if it's less than a certain amount to buy a house or to build a studio or whatever, right? And so I'm kind of thinking about all this, and my buddy, who was the SVP of a big, pretty important music company in Los Angeles, and an attorney, he had papered all of their deals and was sort of one of Exploration's first big clients. He had left there and hung out a shingle to help broker deals. And so, and then it was right at the beginning of COVID. And so we just had like a standing Zoom every couple weeks to just kind of hang out and check in with each other and like, what's going on? And I'm like, Miles, you've got the brokerage experience. I've got the analysis and the administration experience. Why don't let's kind of join forces and buy some catalogs for people that really don't have a home, right? That if you're making 30 grand a year, it's probably not even your full-time job, which means it's being ignored even more than it could be, should be. Yeah. But if you want a liquidation event, if you want to sell that, or it needs, an estate needs to sell it because of heirs or whatever, there's really not any great places to do that. And so he and I said, okay, well then, after kind of going through the paces and really, analyzing the market, that this was an opportunity that, anybody that's in Nashville knows that the number of people that are making above $200,000 a year from their music is small, right? There's a huge population of people just in the United States that are making a lot less than $200,000.
Yeah.
So to give them some sort of facility to sell that revenue stream, we felt like was an opportunity. And so we created Tuesday Music.
And so you don't even compete with like the Round Hills or the Hypnosis of the world, right? You're focusing on small to medium-sized artists or even composers, right?
Right.
Is that what you're normally gearing towards?
That's right.
The composer side of it, composition.
Right. I mean, that's our sort of our bread and butter is
Okay.
the publishing
Gotcha.
publishing business. And yeah, I mean, Hypnosis is buying things 40 and up. The same thing with Round Hill. I mean, or not 40, 4 to 5 and up is where they kind of start. But they have, I mean, Hypnosis, I think at this point has got something like $2 billion deployed. And so they just don't have enough time to do onesies, twosies, $1 million, 600,000, $1.2 million. They just don't have enough time to deploy that much capital.
So there's a whole other market out there.
I mean, there's other companies that are doing sort of a similar thing, but they're doing it with YouTubers, where a YouTuber is got, they've got, 50,000 subscribers, and they're making a few $1,000s a month, and it's not enough to pay their bills, and they've moved on to something else. But that is a real revenue stream.
That they're still getting views.
That's right. Every single month. And it's not even being worked, right? It's not being optimized. It's not being pushed. It's not being added to. And yet they can't do anything with it. There's some folks popping up now that are starting to kind of look at that and say, hey, that this might be an opportunity. But, I think it's opportunity.
I mean, yeah, I just think this whole, I mean, your background is like, I played college hockey, like I was in the music industry, like all this stuff, and like I'm surrounded by it, and like there's such a gap with like investing in the music industry, right? There's more money than people think in it, right? And do you play or are you just like?
Unfortunately, no. My sister is an opera singer. My dad is got a dozen albums, singer-songwriter, and no, but I didn't get the gene, unfortunately.
Well,
we got the entrepreneurial gene, so
that's
works out.
That's all that matters. And tell me more about like when you're investing into this catalog or whatever. How do you reach these people? Is what I want to talk about, and then also how do you go out and get the capital for Tuesday Music? Right? I mean,
sure. So. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember who it was that said it, but when I was learning and I was studying and I was trying to figure out what it meant to work in music and how does it work and all this sort of thing, a little kernel I got from somebody in passing was that, what do you have, or do you have the rights to collect the money, and can you collect the money? Mm-hmm. Is what it all comes down to, right? And so, do you have the rights, and can you collect every penny? And so, with regard to analysis of catalog, the first thing is, what is being sold? Is it the mechanical right in France? Is it all rights for the world? Is it the writer share, the publisher share? Like, what is it exactly that are you selling? And do you have the right to sell that? Is there some sort of license that or contract or something that is preventing you from selling this as you think you're selling it? Asking this question to the writer. And then the question for myself is, do I have the ability to then go out and collect every penny? Fortunately, with Exploration is tooled up at this point. It's a 70-person company at this point that's able to. That's what we do every day, is for lots and lots of copyrights, is go out and collect every micro penny around the world. And so the way that we've grown Exploration was, at first I was just like dialing for dollars, right? I was just like calling people, which in retrospect is pretty naive, people in the music business are skeptics for good reason.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Schadenfreude and bullshit, frankly, that it goes on in the music business because it's so opaque, right? We've seen the movie Searching for Sugarman, right? This is a true story. This is rampant across the business. And so, for good reason, when I'd cold call them and say, hey, there's all this money you're leaving on the table, they were like, please don't ever call me again. And so what my pitch, as it were, changed to was explaining, here's how it works. Here's the way this business works. Here's where you might be leaving money on the table. The only record of your music that you're telling me you have is a photograph of liner notes. It doesn't surprise me that you're not getting paid by Spotify in Sweden for a play in Japan. That's not surprising. You need the data to be exactly right in order for you to get the money that you're due. And so as I'm explaining this stuff, I was like, you know what? I should just write this down. I don't scale very well. So, if I write it down and put it up online for free, then by explaining this stuff, I can do a couple things. I can show that I'm not a complete moron. It'll explain to some folks that here's the way they can do it if they are adept and they want to do it themselves. And I can kind of build some of my credibility because I was new in the business. My business partner, Renee, had a sterling, and still does, has a sterling reputation. And so it was really, as we got started, it was based on her reputation, not mine, to get started. So that was the first guide in how the music business works on YouTube. Wrote that, put it online, kind of forgot about it for a little while. And I was doing something else and came back and was checking out the analytics on our site and was like, wow, there's like people reading this thing every single day from around the world. It's like, 5, 6, 10 people a day. And I was like, that's very interesting. Let's write a guide for every facet of the business. And so that became a book, How the Music Business Works, which is now is in its second edition and is a textbook. It's 570 pages long.
That you wrote.
That we wrote. Well, I and other people at Exploration contributed to.
Okay.
That we wrote is a textbook, but all of it is available on our site, exploration.io/learn. It's on Amazon for sale. All the proceeds go to music education. We don't make our money selling books. We make our money representing music. But what it did is establish us as somewhat of an authority in the space. We've kind of paid it forward to explain, here's how all these things work, right? The back office, the business side of the music business. And as that began to get proliferated around, the phone began to ring and ring and ring. And so part of what we're doing at Tuesday is explaining now, here's what it means to sell your catalog. Here's how long it takes. Here's why it's important to have the data organized and collated and compiled and augmented the way it should, that it's cleaned up, that it's not an ownership conflict over here and over there. Just explaining, here's what, the market is saying is reasonable right now as it relates to a multiple, and that we're just explaining, here's how it works. And our belief, we're just getting started in this, so our belief is that will then translate into folks that are interested in having their catalog go to a good home that we might be considered. Exploration at this point has got somewhere on the order of 100, 150 people applying each month to be administered by us. And so some of those are being converted into, we believe can be converted into sales or acquisitions. But if that is true over there, our belief or our thesis is that we can kind of replicate that at Tuesday as well.
Dang. Well, and then talk me through on investing actually in these, catalogs or compositions on the publishing side. I mean, how did you go out and first off, how big is your fund? And then how did you go out, get all that money, and then focus on telling these investors that, hey, this is gonna provide a huge return, right?
Sure. So for context, we're sort of in the middle of October 2022, and the markets right now are being ratcheted up, pretty consistently each month. The Fed, each time the Fed is meeting, they're ratcheting up the interest rates, and so the use of debt right now is becoming questionable, is whether or not it makes sense to use debt. And so our fund, our initial fund, I was like, look, I don't want to get out over my skis. Let's raise $10 million. And we had a relationship with a senior banker at a big bank that has a focus on entertainment that said, we believe in what you're doing, and we've vetted you for other projects. And so we'd be willing to underwrite this. But the rates are such that it really decreases our cash flow. I'm going to get into a little bit about what cash flow and the multiples and this sort of thing, but it really decreases our multiples or impedes our ability to take a lot of cash flow. But the reason why one might still choose to use debt now is such that it'll increase the total fund size, such that when it's liquidated on the back end, there's more to be split up.
Oh, interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that some advisors were saying, the fund you're raising is too small. You should just, you should raise more money. And I just disagreed. I was like, I disagree, much to the same sort of in the same way of testing an idea with a fake Airbnb ad. That $10 million in the grand scheme of things is a very, very small fund. But I feel like if we can go out, we're unproven as fund managers at this point. And so what I believe is that if I can go out and sort of show my mettle with a small fund, that fund 2 through 30 is going to be really easy, and we can start to ratchet up, the size of the fund and the volume. Again, part of our thesis is to systemize the acquisition process such that the acquisition cost or the transactional cost goes way down, and we've done that. And so part of the thesis is onesies, twosies, that they can be purchased at a relatively low multiple, 5, 8, 10, 12x, annual revenues. And then as a collective, if we've bundled, as it were, if we've rolled up, $15, $20 million worth of those, and then they're all clean and they're packaged up real nice, and there's no conflicts in the data, and it makes it very, very easy for a buyer that we can package that up, and that as a collective can then be sold to the likes of a Roundhill or a Hypnosis for a 15, 17, a 20 multiple. And so we're buying at 10 and we're selling at 20. And then there's that delta is where we get our cheese, as it were.
That's insane. I mean, just how it all works. There's so many ways to invest.
Totally. I mean, Hypnosis is a public company. You know, they're listed on the London Stock Exchange.
I didn't know that.
You can you can buy into that company and you can enjoy the proceeds of that company and you know the roll up industry, as it were, is long and proven that we're gonna go out and you know, I met a guy recently that was buying up lawn care. He was rolling. He had a fund, and he was buying up and rolling up small lawn care companies to the at between 500 and 2 million, 500,000 to 2 million. He's going to roll them up and create some synergies across them, digitize them all, clean them up, some economies of scale, and then once he's got $20 million worth, it's not only is it generating a lot more revenue because you only need one office manager for all of those companies instead of them each needing an office manager, as an example. But then that company with a bit more heft and a bit more breadth, that it can be sold at a higher multiple on the end. And so that's sort of a proven, roll-ups are a thing. And so we're sort of applying that same sort of idea to music. And we're finding these smaller catalogs that are important music that deserve the attention and need a good home, deserve a good home, and kind of bundling them up with the hopes of having some sort of liquidation event. Ultimately, and this is part of, I don't know how this will work, and we're kind of we're wading into these waters now, but ultimately I believe in it's sort of what astute investors and families have done forever, is buy assets that are good and important, steward them appropriately, refinance them in a tax advantaged way, and hold them forever and never sell them. And so you can refinance and pull money out as markets will allow and when interest rates are attractive. But ultimately, I would prefer to find assets that we might be able to enjoy forever. That one of the things that's great about copyrights is that they're, the longevity of those is incredible.
That's what I was going to say. You don't need to sell, right?
You don't need to sell.
All right, and I want to shift gears for a moment because I know, outside the music business on the side, you've always done sort of some residential real estate, and you have like a clever strategy around that. Can you sort of share about it with our listeners?
Sure. So I guess the short story is that the entire game in the United States is rigged for people that own real estate. Okay?
Oh, yeah, you told me that.
The tax code, everything as it relates to generating wealth is rigged for people that own real estate. And so to back up a little bit, as I started to make a little bit of money at exploration, I asked one of my smart friends, what should I do? I don't want this money just to sit in the bank. I want to invest it. Separately, a lot of the gals and guys that I knew that had a lifestyle that I thought that I wanted in the future when I was their age, all owned some sort of real estate. And then my clients, my music clients were like, Aaron, if you make a single nickel in real estate, go buy a shitty rental house. The music business is a fickle mistress, right? Like what's a hit today, it's gone tomorrow. And just like, don't rely on that to retire. And so I'm kind of thinking about this, and I was in my late 30s, and I'm starting to think about it a little bit. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go buy a rental house, right? And I'm going to go to Bakersfield. I was living in LA. I'm going to go to Bakersfield, where they've got it's sort of a blue collar, sort of agrarian community, good rental market. I'm going to buy a rental house, and I'm going to do this once a year, and I'm going to pay them off, and then by the time I'm in my late 40s or early 50s, I will have started paying them off, and then I can retire, right? And so I've got this thesis about how humans have not evolved to think very far beyond a year or two, based upon the fact that it takes 9 months to have a kid, and based on, it's like we're very much, we were very much, we relied on farming to live. And so, come spring, you better plant, and come fall, you better harvest because winter is coming.
Winter gotta stock up, yeah.
You know? And so, to think about a 10 or a 15 or a 30 year, I think I got 40-year mortgages now, is this idea that it's hard for us to conceptualize. But what I just sort of suspended disbelief. I went to Bakersfield. I found this house that I thought had good bones, or I found it online, and I'm like studying the streets and I'm, the neighborhood and all this stuff. And I look at Google Maps, the satellite image, and there's like 3 campers in the backyard. And I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. So, if the house rents for $1,200 and each camper rents for, $600, suddenly that's like $4,000. And the mortgage is going to be, like $800 a month. That's a win, right? Now, I don't know if I want to be in the camper business, but it had me thinking about, the ability to add another unit. And so that's sort of my thesis. If I buy this thing, can I add another unit? And so the way my real estate practice has evolved is it started with my own house. I put my own house in escrow. I built, I did the fake Airbnb ad to see if I could get an Airbnb unit on my property. Mm-hmm. That worked out. And so I bought the house. I put the Airbnb. And then from that, I found a house that had good bones that was 20 minutes away here in Nashville. It had a basement that was, it was an unfinished basement. But I bought the house. I finished out the basement. I did a cash out refinance based on the total square footage. So I doubled the square footage of the house. Yeah. The loan is based on the square footage of the house. And so I basically doubled the value of the property. I took that money out. I found there was a mobile home park that you shared with me through the grapevine, that somebody wanted to sell, but it had 25 acres of undeveloped property in the park. And so I bought the park. I got the approvals to expand the park. And then with those approvals, doubled the value of the property. I sold that. The original house with the basement that I finished out, I subdivided that and am able to add 4 duplexes to it. And so it went from 1 unit to 9 units. And this is the thesis, right? Is that is there an opportunity to add a unit? And it can be anything. It can be another bedroom and bathroom. So instead of it being a 3-bedroom house, now it's a 4-bedroom house. Maybe it's an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, or a mother-in-law suite. Maybe it's a garage that I can convert. And so it just changes the economics of the property, that it's being valued on this valuation based on this square footage and this rental income. And I can come in and I can finish out this garage for $25,000 and make it clever. And suddenly I just doubled the rental income. It's a home run, right? And then I can have it reappraised and I can refinance it based on this doubled income and pull that money out and go do it again.
So, and not many people think like that, right? I mean, so how many properties do you have all in all?
Now
or I guess total, like you've sold,
You typically hold them though.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hold them forever. I want to buy something. I want it to be good bones, and I want to hold it forever.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you do a lot off market too?
Everything's off market if I can help it. Everything's off market. So there's this
app.
And
how do you find those?
Yeah, Landglide is this killer app that allows you to. It's GPS enabled. That if you see something where the grass isn't being mowed or it's just not being taken care of. The owners probably don't care about it, and maybe it's an absentee owner. Anyway, you can pull it up on Landglide, and then I mail them a letter, and it has 2 sentences. I'm interested in your house on 3rd Street. If you'd be interested in accepting an offer, please call me at your convenience. With my business card or my phone number, handwritten, in the mail, and it goes out to them. It has about a 10% response rate.
That's a pretty good response rate.
No, but I mean, what I used to do, what I did in LA is that I would have the title company do an analysis. I would say, hey, look, I like this neighborhood. I want you to run title for the entire neighborhood. Wow. And then I would filter the results of that in a spreadsheet. I would filter the results for people that had 50% or more equity. And then I would write them all that same letter. And so if they had 50% or more equity meant that they could do a deal.
Yeah.
And this one lady on 21st Street, north of Montana in Santa Monica, super nice neighborhood, was like, she calls me. She's like, "Are you real?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." She's like, "My husband passed away 10 years ago. I went and visited this, this community, this older folks community. I really love it. I'd love to be able to sell it, but I don't want to have any tire kickers or anything." And I'm like, I almost opened but for what it's worth, whoever says the first number loses in any negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost was like, "I'll give you X," but I didn't. And I said, "What would you like for it?"
What do you
And
want
she's
for it?
like, "Would $2 million be okay?" I was like, "Yes, ma'am. That would be fine." And so I went over, I did the deal. She was very grateful. I said, "I may sell this. I'm a developer. I'm an investor." And she's like, "No, I don't care what you do with it. I just, you're going to close on this?"
Yeah.
"Yes, ma'am." "Okay." And so we closed on a Thursday. I cut the grass. On Monday, I put it on the market for 2.6, and it sold in multiple offers.
That's insane.
And this sort of thing is, it just take, someone says, all the deals are done in New York. There's no more deals. And I'm like, what are all these cranes going now?
Yeah.
It's like people are dying. People are getting married. People are starting a business, selling a business. There's movement in the market. There always will be,
Yep.
right? There's always things going on, and there's a need to, I want to go over here. There's opportunity cost to do something over there. People are going to, there's transactional flow all the time.
Yeah. I know someone who finds off-market deals because they read, like, whoever's filing for divorce, I guess,
And
is public
bankruptcy,
knowledge.
totally.
But they just target people divorcing, go in and say, "Hey, we'll buy this for cash now," and it's like been a great strategy because they're targeting people at like that life. There's always things happening in people's lives. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
That's so smart. I mean, yeah. There's just so many ways. Like you said, there's so much movement in the market. There's so many ways.
People having a baby, their kids are going to college. They need to downsize. They need another room.
And the handwritten letter, most people don't do that. I get texts and
Emails
calls, but
and LinkedIn messages.
I think the letter reaches an audience that might
It gets read at 100% of the time. A handwritten letter gets read 100% of the time. And I believe it's like a 3-year seed, right? If you put a seed in somebody's ear, within 3 years, you're gonna get some action on it. They're gonna be like, they're gonna have it in the back of their mind. I can invite this person over. We can have a discussion about this. I mean, I think this is a whole nother conversation, but to think that there's and people have tried that that the rare bird in a lot of markets is the buyer that's willing and able to execute, and that if by telling the marketplace that I exist as a buyer, that I'm providing value. And so if I tell a seller that they can invite me over, we can have a cup of coffee, we can discuss a mutually agreed upon or not price, there's no risk in that. And their neighbors aren't going to think they're in foreclosure. They're not going to have people coming in kicking the tires. They can invite me over. It doesn't need to be cleaned. It doesn't need to be painted. You don't need to fix that light or whatever.
Yep.
This is my offer, and if that's acceptable to you, then we can do a deal quietly, quickly, and move on. Then that's attractive for a lot of folks.
That's insane. Yeah. Well, it looks like we're running out of time here. I definitely think that we need a part 2 with Aaron Davis here.
I hope so.
There's so much to talk about and to continue on. I mean, Zap, do you got any last things?
No, this was great. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we look forward to following your journey with exploration and Tuesday music and real estate, everything else you do. And we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Take good care.
Thanks.
We'll see you.
All right.